John Deere 60. Owned by Kiefer Brothers out of Maple Park, Illinois. Here's a beautifully restored 1944 John Deere A. This is Chuck Person that's out of Sycamore, Illinois, training a new driver. Here's a tractor that looks like it still gets a lot of work done. 1951 Ford Dain. This is Adam Helgeson out of Rochelle, Illinois. Here we have a 1936 Farmall 12 owned by Chris Gordon out of Hampton Hills. Here's a John Deere B. It's a 1937. This would have been part of the GP line. Again, you can tell by the way that the hood is just pretty much a piece of sheet metal folded over the top of the engine there. Here is a Farmall Super M. It is a 1955. It is owned by Bob Thoreau out of Hampshire, Illinois, with family in tow. Absolutely, absolutely. Here is a 1979 International 184. This is Gordon Bruckner's out of Sycamore, Illinois. This would have been used for small farm work or possibly garden tractor work, or if you had maybe a larger property, use it to do your mowing and any other work that you need to get done around the homestead. Here's a 1942 John Deere LA. This is Gordon Bruckner's out of Sycamore, Illinois. Here's another John Deere, part of the GP line as well.
This is a half-scale replica Townsend traction engine. What looks like a boiler on this machine is actually a primitive radiator. Oftentimes during the transition era away from steam, these companies would design engines that were similar in appearance to steam to help farmers and operators feel a little bit more comfortable with their machinery.
Here's Dennis Schenk's 1937 John Deere B. Beautifully restored. Here's a tractor in working clothes, a Minneapolis Moline UTS, the 1947, and it's Phil Geisler's out of Marengo, Illinois.
The very first steam threshers reunion in the United States was held in 1946 in Waupun, Ohio. From that point on, the hobby began, and many shows like the one you're at today sprouted up across the country. If you couldn't afford a full-size traction engine, or didn't have the desire to own one, many machinists, farmers, and hobbyists would create their own, and this is one such example. This is a third scale, quarter scale, okay, Reeves traction engine, and I stand corrected, we have 3 double-cylinder traction engines technically here on the grounds today.
Here's a 1948 Minneapolis Moline ZTU, owned by Richard Landorf out of Rockford, Illinois, a beautifully restored tractor. Here's a Case 400, it's a 1956. This is Mac Landorf's out of Marengo, Illinois. This is a 1956 Case SC, owned by Wayne Butts out of Maple Park, Illinois. Here's a 1948 Farmall C, Thomas Bierke out of Hampshire, Illinois. This Elkos out of Kingston, Illinois. Here's a 1948 Farmall Cub, part of the John Elko collection out of Kingston as well. Looks like he still gets work and gets some lawn mowed. Here's a 1939 John Deere Dain 3840 Style 4-speed, part of the John Elko collection out of Kingston. Here's James Drescon's 1948 John Deere Dain out of Genoa, Illinois, representing the Genoa Lions Club. The 1952 Farmall H, Bill Peterson's out of Genoa, Illinois. This is quite amusing here. A 1950 John Deere 50 with no hood on it. You get to see everything that's under the hood. Here's a 1993 John Deere 3365 turf mower. Chris Johnson's out of Cortland, Illinois. This is the mower that helps mow the showgrounds. Chris Johnson himself, who's driving, helps to do all the repairs on it and fix it up. This was originally the groundskeeping mower for the Caneland High School. And this is a McCormick Farmall Super C. Looks like it's done some mowing recently too. Here's a John Deere A. 1945. Here's a 1954 John Deere 70. Don Bodie's out of Sycamore, Illinois. Here's a 1954 John Deere 60. This is Andrew and Dana Eggers out of Clinton, Iowa. Thanks for making it all the way here. Here's Jeremy Luce on his 1945 Farmall H out of McChesney Park, Illinois. 1954, I'm sorry. He just recently acquired this and is working on restoring it. We look forward to seeing it next year. Here's a 1944 Farmall H, owned by the Luce family. Here's a 1936 John Deere B, Mike Bucky out of Parrish, Florida. Coming up, we have a very powerful pulling tractor, a 1957 John Deere 720 diesel. Stephen Bagg out of Esmond, Illinois. Here's a John Deere in working clothes with a beautiful patina on it, a 1954 John Deere 60. Tim Schultz from Hampshire, Illinois, training a new driver. This tractor is for sale. If you've been looking to get your own tractor, you can get this 1953 John Deere 50. Owned by Tim Schultz out of Elburn. Here's a Farmall Super C owned by Alan Enderman out of Naperville, Illinois. Rob Ryan's coming through the parade again. This is a 1938 Alice. No, it's not. One behind you. This is a Farmall A. It's a 1941. Owned by Rob Ryan out of Burlington. Yeah, no, it's not. You're right. It's not orange. Oh, doing a little plowing on the parade route here. See how those are mounted directly underneath, and it's just a lever pole. Here's the 1938 Alice Chalmers WC owned by Steve Frederick out of Sycamore. Thank you. Here's a 1941 Case SC. This is Bill Fredericks out of Sycamore with a host of new drivers. Here is a 1951 John Deere Dain 47, the 47 late style. This is Joe Linz out of Sycamore, Illinois. Cub Scout Pack 118. 19, Pack 119. 1-8. Pack 1-8, 18, Pack 18. Here's a 1952 John Deere 60, owned by Eugene Morgan out of Hampshire. Here we have an extra wide-looking 1936 Farmall F20, owned by Frederick Harbeck out of DeKalb, Illinois. Here's a 1948 Farmall M, Eldon Pfaff out of Huntley. Here we have a nice little Farmall Cub. Great small farm tractor and possibly yard work tractor if you've got the yard for it. Here's a beautiful Minneapolis Moline Z. Here's a 1941 John Deere B, 4147, styled 6-speed, Harry Swanson Jr.'s out of Mundelein. Here comes Taylor Sunderledge on his John Deere 520, the little brother to the 720 that you saw come through earlier. Taylor is local to the show from Sycamore, Illinois. He's also one of our directors and does a lot of work around here. Coming up here is another piece of Taylor Sunderledge's collection, driven by his cousin Wyatt. This is a John Deere 4020. 4020 at the time when John Deere made it, between the 60s and 70s, one of the most popular tractors that they ever made. They produced more of them than they produced any other tractor up to that point, and it continued to be one of their most produced tractors until about the 90s. Here's Mike Wright on his 1950 Case FC. Michael's out of Burlington, Illinois, also does a lot of work here at the show. Here's Samantha Smith on her newly acquired 1951 Minneapolis Moline R from Elgin, Illinois, and the fiance to Mike Wright. Here's a 1940 Ford 8N, 9N. Owned by Maxwell Wilson out of Marengo, Illinois. Now here's a 1937 John Deere B, owned by Bruce Johnson out of Rochelle, Illinois. This is like the GPs you saw come through earlier, but you may notice something a little different. It's got the steel wheels on it. Here's a 1970 International 656, owned by Sparky and Brandy Hayes Halt out of Hampshire, Illinois. The nice umbrella up there to keep you out of the sun during those hard work days. Here's the 1957 John Deere 720, owned by Brian and Laverne Wright out of Maple Park, Illinois. Here's a 1949 Farmall 8, owned by Serena Breckschneider out of Belvedere, Illinois, in memory of Frank James Mayer. With a nice little barrel train behind it. You can see the tongue, even though each barrel only has 2 wheels, the weight of the tongue sits on the barrel in front of it, letting it support itself as it goes along. This is a John Deere B, driven by Kevin Polinsky. I'm sorry, Kevin. I'm going to butcher that every time. I'm so sorry. Palinowski. Here's a Ford 2N, a 1945, owned by Mark Reiner, training a new driver. Mark Reimers out of Dundee, Illinois. Here's a Farmall H. It's a 1946, 19 horsepower, owned by Ken Benson out of Cortland, Illinois, in memory of Casey Bugg. Here's a beautiful 1941 Ford 9N, owned by Kenneth Benson out of Cortland, Illinois. With some nice diamond plate to make sure that you don't slip while you're doing your work. Here's a nice little John Deere 110, also owned by Kenneth Benson out of Cortland, Illinois. The 110 was the model that John Deere first produced for garden tractors. We'll see some earlier models come through later. Here's an Oliver 880. This is a 1952, and it's owned by Mark Brown out of Sycamore, Illinois. Here's a Cub Lowboy 154, owned by Teresa Coffey out of Huntley, Illinois. Even though this looks like a John Deere, do not be fooled. It is not. This is a 1965 owned by John Peterson. And this was originally a German tractor that has been converted to make it John Deere. We like our green and yellow around here. And now we're on to some garden tractors and lawn tractors. Here's a John Deere 60, probably about 80s. Maybe early 90s. Here's a John Deere 755. Here is an earlier model. Here is a 1967 John Deere 110. This is Thomas Ray's out of DeKalb, Illinois. You can see that it has, instead of the one-piece fender that goes down into the footboard, it has what we call clamshell fenders. They are round and bolt on to the side. Here's Taylor Sunday Village's John Deere 110, 1966. Here's a wheel horse, which I mentioned earlier. They were often popular for making the half-scale models. This is a Raider 12. It's got 6 speed on it. This is a Cub Cadet with definitely not a Cub Cadet engine on it. Owned by Philip Mood out of Elgin, Illinois. And here's another wheel horse, owned by Ryan Frederick. Here's a Phantom 3 horsepower, owned by Austin Frederick out of Sycamore, Illinois. Oh, and look at this. He's going to give us a little demonstration of the maneuverability of this little lawn mower. Here's a Cub Cadet 108. It's a 1971. Owned by Jerry Darling out of Marengo, Illinois. And here is a Cub Cadet 109. So we saw the 108, this is the 109. And it is a 1972, also owned by Jerry Darling out of Marengo.
This is a 1/3 scale advanced Rumley oil bulb tractor owned by the Stevens family. We have a group of young people people here at the club notice the green team that work on restoring old tractors, and the ensemble there with the oil pull is the green team.
And here now we have a collection of cases from the Maynard Kincaid collection and others. There is a 442, there's a 444. Here comes a 190. Cases were very popular as garden tractors and lawn tractors because unlike a lot of other earlier model garden tractors, which were belt-driven, these had hydrostatic drive, so they were much stronger. Here is a Colt 1966, 12 horsepower. Harvey's Dream Tractor. Looks like it's based on a John Deere 110. It is, and it's a 1974, and it is Bonnie Delate out of DeKalb, Illinois, with a nice double seat on there to accommodate passengers. Here's a John Deere 140, and it belongs to Hayden Bagg out of Sycamore, Illinois. 14 horses on that 140, came after the 110. This is a 165 Hydro. This is a John Deere, and it is owned by out of Carpentersville, Illinois. Here's a John Deere 318. It's a 1987, owned by Matthew Tracy out of Carpentersville, Illinois. Here's a 1960 Economy Jim Dandy. This is also part of the Maynard Kincaid collection out of Rockford, Illinois. And I believe that this is pulling up the end of our parade here, a 1965 Colt Super, owned by Jonathan Kincaid out of Monroe Center, Illinois.
And let's recognize two gentlemen that have been helping this parade. Jay Staley and Scott Stubbs have helped organize this at the beginning, and we offer them a great fan of approval. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody, for watching the parade. But the show is not over yet. Go and get some good food at many of the great vendors that we have around here. To peruse the flea market, see if you can find any good deals.